My name is Isabella Monroe. I'm 29 years old, a mother, and the founder of a multi-million-dollar branding agency based in San Diego. 11 years ago, my mother called me an embarrassment, slapped me across the face, and threw me out of our family estate in Charleston. My crime? Saying no to the man she had chosen for me. Today, I returned to Charleston, for the first time since that night, on my private jet with my 5-year-old son, Aiden. The look on my mother's face when I stepped out of that sleek black car in front of the Monroe house, holding my son's hand, was worth every sleepless night and every tear I shed to get here. But before I tell you what happened when we saw each other again, let me take you back to the moment everything changed. Growing up as a Monroe meant living inside a glass case. On the outside, our world looked immaculate. Magnolia-lined driveways, tailored garden parties, and society columns that praised us as Charleston's modern Southern royalty. But inside, our lives were dictated by tradition, control, and image. My mother, Vivian Monroe, wasn't just obsessed with appearances. She was consumed by them. She believed every part of my life had to be curated, from the dresses I wore to the friends I was allowed to speak to. My father, Charles, a quiet and elegant man who worked in private wealth management, rarely said much. His silence was his contribution to the control. From the age of 13, I was being molded into a future socialite wife. Cotillion classes replaced soccer practice. Instead of applying to out-of-state colleges, I was coached on flower arrangement and small talk, and I obeyed, until the night they tried to marry me off. Bennett Ashford was 35, polished, powerful, and cold. I knew him only as my father's business associate until one summer evening, during a candlelit dinner with crystal glasses and veiled smiles, he stood up and proposed, right there, in front of his parents, in front of mine, in front of the housekeeper pretending not to listen from the hallway. I was 18. I still remember my mother's hand tightening around her wine glass as she beamed with forced pride. My father nodded, lips pressed tight. Everyone waited for my answer like I was the final piece in a real estate deal. I stood. I looked at Bennett's perfect smile, and I said, no. The room fell silent. A fork dropped. My mother's expression twisted, but she said nothing. Not yet. I walked out of the room, heels echoing across the marble, and into the humid Charleston night. I didn't make it far. My mother caught up with me in the grand foyer. She didn't yell, she didn't plead. She slapped me. Then she whispered, "Get out. You've embarrassed us enough." And just like that, the front doors opened, and I was no longer a Monroe. That night, I stood on the sidewalk with nothing but a small suitcase, a tear-streaked face, and a heart that had just been severed from everything I'd ever known. What I didn't know then was that this exile would become the beginning of everything I was meant to be. From the outside, our family was Charleston elegance personified. Sunday brunches at the country club, matching family photos on the front page of the Gazette, invitations to every prestigious charity gala in the region. But inside our home, there was no warmth, only rules. Vivian Monroe, my mother, treated motherhood like a social strategy. I wasn't her daughter. I was her project, her blueprint for social elevation. She decided which piano pieces I played, which friends I kept, which smiles were acceptable in public. And when I dared to push back, when I wanted to audition for the school play instead of attending cotillion rehearsal, she would lean close with her perfectly manicured hand on my shoulder and whisper, "We don't raise spectacle girls, Isabella. We raise wives of future power." My father, Charles, didn't enforce her laws, but he didn't stop them either. If I looked at him with pleading eyes, all I got was a slow sip of his bourbon and a soft, "Your mother knows best." As I entered my senior year of high school, my mother's obsession turned sharper. That fall, she began inviting the Ashfords over regularly, especially their eldest son, Bennett. I was told to be presentable, always in pastels, always smiling. Bennett was everything my mother admired: wealthy, connected, and Southern-bred. But behind the charm, I saw something else: calculated entitlement. He was twice my age, twice divorced, and entirely uninterested in who I was outside of my family name and future womb. At dinners, his gaze lingered too long. His hand once brushed the curve of my back, and when I pulled away, he smiled like I was amusing. I told my mother it made me uncomfortable. Her response? You should be honored he's even interested. Girls would kill for this match. I remember the night she had the housekeepers iron my navy silk dress. She braided my hair herself, a rare act of intimacy that made me uneasy. Tonight will change everything, she said, pinning an antique brooch to my collar. And one day you'll thank me. That dinner was the trap. The soft music, the excessive silverware, the tension that danced in the air. Bennett stood after dessert, held up a ring box and turned to me. Isabella Monroe, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? I froze. I felt every eye on me. My mother's face, radiant with expectation. My father's nod. Bennett's confident smirk. I looked at them all, then stood. No. That single word cracked the room like thunder. My mother didn't scream. Not there. She simply excused herself. My father said nothing. The Ashfords left in a flurry of embarrassment, but I knew. I had detonated everything. And that night, the storm didn't just rage outside. It roared inside our walls. The rain hadn't stopped when the front doors shut behind me. I stood on the porch in my silk dress, the chill sinking deep into my bones. My cheek still burned from my mother's slap, but what hurt more was the silence. The way my father had watched me crumble and said nothing. I didn't have a plan. I had no money, no luggage except the small overnight bag I had packed for what was supposed to be a special family dinner. But I had a phone, and I had one name I knew I could call. Harper Lee, the girl with a quick laugh, chipped nail polish, and a stubborn sense of justice, had been my roommate during a summer writing program 2 years before. She lived in New York now, attending design school. We had stayed in touch secretly through emails and burner accounts my mother never found. Harper, I whispered into the phone as I huddled under a bus stop down the street. I have nowhere else to go. She didn't ask questions. Get here. We'll figure it out. I arrived in New York 2 days later after using the last of my emergency debit card to buy a bus ticket. Harper met me at the station, wrapped me in her arms, and gave me her worn-out hoodie before we took the subway to her studio apartment in Brooklyn. That tiny space, cluttered with sketchbooks, ramen packets, and incense, became my safe haven. The first few weeks were pure survival. I slept on Harper's couch, washed dishes at a dive bar during the night, and handed out flyers during the day. I enrolled in night classes at a nearby community college, scraping together the fee with tips and leftover change. It was in those cold, fluorescent-lit lecture halls that I first heard the term brand identity. The concept fascinated me. The idea that image, message, and authenticity could shape how the world saw a product, a company, even a person. I realized I had lived my entire life as a walking brand built by someone else. I decided I was going to build my own. I started creating mood boards and case studies between shifts. I researched logos and color theory, taught myself graphic design basics from free YouTube videos, and shadowed marketing interns when I could. One morning, while delivering coffee for an event hosted by a boutique PR firm, I overheard a woman in a gray pantsuit scolding her assistant over a failed campaign pitch. I don't know what pushed me, but I spoke up. I think your campaign failed because it doesn't tell a story. It sells the product, but not the soul. The woman turned sharply. And you are? Nobody, I admitted, holding out her coffee order. But I read the deck, and I think you could do better. She stared at me for a long moment, then took her drink. The next day, she returned to the cafe, handed me her card. Naomi West, we're hiring. Come to the office tomorrow. That moment changed everything. The office of West & Row was nothing like I imagined. Polished marble floors, oversized art prints, assistants who moved like they were always one email behind. I stood in the lobby in my only clean blouse, hands damp with nerves, Naomi's business card pressed between my fingers like a lifeline. She didn't interview me in a conference room. Instead, she motioned me into her glass-walled office, leaned back in her chair, and said, "Convince me you're worth investing in." I told her everything. Not just about the campaign I critiqued, but about how I'd been studying branding obsessively. How I stayed up nights analyzing what made a logo timeless. How storytelling changed the way people trust a brand. I expected her to cut me off. Instead, she nodded. "You've got grit. You'll need it." That's how I became Naomi's assistant. Technically, I answered phones and fetched coffee. But what I really did was watch and learn. I arrived early and stayed late, memorized client notes, eavesdropped on meetings, and took notes even when I wasn't asked. And in the quiet hours after everyone left, I studied branding strategy, copywriting, consumer psychology. 3 months in, Naomi handed me a folder. We're revamping a local brand's identity. Create 3 concepts, show me how you think. I didn't sleep that weekend. I sketched, rewrote, color-coded, and built a presentation from scratch. She chose one of my designs, didn't just approve it, she used it. The final campaign ran with my tagline, my aesthetic, my voice. And when the numbers came in, a 140% increase in engagement, she brought me into the meeting, not just the break room. "You've got the instincts," she said simply. "Refine them." Over the next 2 years, I rose from assistant to strategist. I built portfolios, secured mid-level clients, and created campaigns that landed us on niche industry blogs. My name started to matter. But I wanted more. I wanted my own vision. I wanted to build something from the ground up, something that didn't just talk about brand identity, but lived and breathed it. The day I handed in my resignation, Naomi didn't look surprised. She opened her desk drawer, pulled out a sealed envelope, and slid it across the table. Inside was a check. $5,000, she said. "Seed money. Call it my bet on you." I left her office shaking, with fear but also with clarity. That night, sitting on Harper's couch, I opened my laptop and typed the first official name into the business registry. Monroe Collective, a name they tried to erase. Now, I was reclaiming it. Monroe Collective started with a folding table, a secondhand laptop, and a big dream inside a shared co-working space in San Diego. My first clients were small, a local candle brand, a vegan bakery, but I treated them like luxury accounts. Every word, every color, every pixel told a story. Within a year, I had more clients than I could manage alone. And in the middle of that chaos, I met Elijah Park. He was an architect, quiet, thoughtful, with the kind of calm energy that stilled the storm inside me. We met at a branding consultation for a sustainable housing project. He sat through my pitch silently, then said, "You don't just sell aesthetics. You sell belief." No one had ever understood me like that. Our connection wasn't fireworks. It was steadier, like learning to breathe fully for the first time. He didn't try to tame me. He didn't shrink under my ambition. He asked questions, listened, believed in what I was building. He once showed up to my office at midnight with soup when he heard I hadn't eaten all day. When I found out I was pregnant, I panicked. I was 25. My business was barely 2 years old. We were opening a second location in Austin. I stared at the pregnancy test and thought, this is how everything unravels. Elijah sat beside me on the bathroom floor. "What are you thinking?" he asked gently. "I'm thinking about my mother," I whispered. About how hard she tried to force me into a life I didn't want. About how I'm terrified of becoming her. He held my hand. "Then we won't. We'll raise this child differently. With choice. With love. No ultimatums." 9 months later, Aiden was born. 5 pounds, 10 ounces of wide-eyed determination, with Elijah's quiet intensity and my stubborn jawline. From the moment I held him, I made a silent vow. He would never grow up thinking love was conditional, that he had to earn approval with obedience. He would know he belonged, no matter what. Running a business with a newborn wasn't easy. I converted our storage closet into a nursery. My meetings were sometimes interrupted by wails or spit up. Clients raised eyebrows, but I didn't apologize. I built a workplace where ambition and motherhood didn't cancel each other out. Elijah took on more flexible projects, becoming Aiden's favorite person in the world. When I came home late from a pitch meeting, I'd find them on the living room floor, surrounded by blocks and construction paper. They made blueprints together. On Aiden's second birthday, we took him to the beach. He built lopsided castles while I watched from a blanket, exhausted but full. Elijah sat beside me, kissed my shoulder, and whispered, "You did it. You're doing it." I didn't cry that day, but I felt something loosen inside me, a release of the last echoes of my mother's voice telling me I'd never succeed on my own. I had created a life, not perfect, but mine, and soon I'd be forced to face the ghosts I thought I had outrun. The email came on a rainy Thursday morning, buried between invoices and brand reports. Subject line, "Thought you should know." It was from my cousin Caroline, someone I hadn't heard from in years. The message was short, clinical. "Hi, Isabella. Your father, Charles Monroe, underwent emergency triple bypass surgery this week. He's stable now, but it was serious. No one wanted to pressure you. Just thought you should know. Caroline." I stared at the screen, hands frozen on my keyboard. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. I hadn't spoken to my father in over a decade. I hadn't heard his voice, hadn't seen his face beyond the occasional accidental glimpse on the internet. And yet, reading those words felt like a direct blow to the chest. He could have died, and I would have found out from an email. After the fact. That night, I sat on our balcony with a glass of wine, watching the city lights flicker like signals I couldn't read. Elijah stepped outside, gently closing the sliding door behind him. "You're quiet," he said. I nodded. "I got a message about my father. Heart surgery, it was serious." His face shifted, concern, understanding, hesitation. "Do you want to reach out?" "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me thinks I owe them nothing. And another part, I don't know what Aiden would think one day if I never tried. Elijah sat beside me. "There's no wrong answer here. But if you ever do decide to go back, I'll be by your side. So will Aiden." I looked at my husband, at the life we'd built from ashes and defiance, and realized something. The chapter I'd closed wasn't finished. It was just waiting. The next morning, during a strategy meeting for our agency's expansion, our COO presented new market data. Out of the 3 proposed cities for our next office, Denver, Scottsdale, and Charleston, Charleston shows the strongest demand and the lowest overhead. I froze. Charleston. My hometown. The place I had vowed never to set foot in again. "It would make a powerful re-entry into the southern luxury market," she added. "We'd dominate." Later, I stood in front of the giant wall map in our office, pinning a marker to the East Coast. My team saw a business opportunity, but I saw something else. A reckoning. Aiden was 5 now. Sharp, curious, he'd started asking questions. Why didn't he have grandparents like the other kids in school? Why did we never visit where Mommy grew up? The answers had become harder to avoid. So I made 2 decisions. 1, Monroe Collective would open its next branch in Charleston. And 2, I would return home, not as a daughter begging for love, but as a woman they couldn't ignore. We touched down in Charleston on a crisp spring morning. The private jet rolled to a smooth stop, sunlight bouncing off the wings like a quiet declaration. Aiden pressed his face to the window, marveling at the green fields and water glinting in the distance. "Is this where you were a kid, Mommy?" he asked. "Yes," I whispered. "But I left a long time ago." A black Audi was waiting for us outside the terminal. Elijah loaded our bags while I strapped Aiden into his car seat, my hands trembling despite the calm smile on my face. We didn't go to a hotel first. I asked the driver to take us directly to the Monroe estate. As we turned down the tree-lined road, everything felt smaller than I remembered. Less imposing, more tired. The gate was still painted white, but the paint was chipped. The hedges were overgrown. The grandeur had faded. I stepped out of the car, straightened my blazer, and reached for Aiden's hand. Elijah stayed back, giving me space. The front door opened before I could ring the bell. My father stood there, thinner, slower, wrapped in a sweater too large for his frame. His face drained of color when he saw me. "Isabella," he said, his voice cracking like old wood. I wasn't sure I'd ever see you again." "Hi, Dad," I said quietly. "This is Aiden, your grandson." Behind him, footsteps approached. My mother appeared in the hallway, just as poised as ever. Pearls at her neck, blouse pressed crisp. But her expression faltered the moment she saw me. She looked at Aiden, then at me, her lips parting but no words coming. "I thought it was time," I said simply. "Time you met him. Time we talked." Silence stretched thin. Finally, my father stepped aside. "Please, come in." The house hadn't changed. Same mahogany furniture, Same family portraits in gold frames. But one thing was missing: me. There were no photos of me in the hallway, no high school awards, no graduation portrait. It was as if I had been erased. We sat in the living room. Aiden, ever curious, wandered to the mantel. "Careful, sweetheart," I said. "Those things are delicate." But my father surprised me. He stepped forward, picked up a small crystal lion, and handed it to Aiden. "That one used to be her favorite," he said softly. "She carried it everywhere." My mother watched the exchange, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. "I saw the article," my father said after a moment. "Business Insider, the Chicago launch. You've built something extraordinary." "You read that?" I asked, stunned. "We've read all of them," my mother said quietly. "Every feature, every award, I kept a scrapbook." I stared at her. She stood, left the room, and returned with a worn leather binder. Inside were clippings, printed articles, photos of events I hadn't even known were public. My face, in every one. It hit me harder than any slap ever had. They hadn't forgotten me. They'd been watching all along, silently, from afar. But there was still one question I had to ask. "Then why didn't you ever call?" My question landed with the weight of 11 years behind it. My father looked down, rubbing a trembling hand across his knee. "We didn't know if you'd want to hear from us," he finally said. "After what happened, after how we treated you, we thought maybe silence would hurt you less." I turned to my mother. Her composure cracked for the first time since I stepped off that plane. "I was proud," she whispered. "I was angry too, and stubborn and terrified, but underneath it, I was proud. Watching you rise on your own, it humbled me in ways I wasn't ready to admit." I held her gaze. "You slapped me and threw me out into the night. I was 18. Her face crumpled. "I know, and I have relived that night 1,000 times. Aiden yawned beside me, oblivious to the undercurrent in the room. I reached over and smoothed his hair. "We're opening a new Monroe Collective office in Charleston," I said, shifting gears. "And we're hiring locally. We're building something here." My father straightened in his chair. "I know your background," I continued, meeting his eyes. "Financial strategy, client relations. I'm offering you a position. Not out of pity, but because I could use someone with your experience." The silence that followed was heavy, but not hostile. "I'd be honored," he said, voice thick. My mother looked stunned. "You're serious?" "I don't do symbolic gestures," I said. "This isn't a reunion for show. If we're going to have a relationship, any relationship, it will be built on honesty and respect." I stood, lifting Aiden gently into my arms. "There are boundaries," I added. "Aiden will be raised to make his own choices. No lectures, no expectations, no manipulation. Do you understand?" My mother nodded slowly. "I do." "Then maybe," I said, "we can begin again." The next evening, Elijah joined us for dinner. My parents were nervous. My mother burned the first batch of biscuits, and my father poured wine like he was still trying to impress him. But Elijah, steady, kind, confident, eased the tension with quiet grace. Over dessert, Aiden told them he wanted to be an astronaut chef with a pet dinosaur. My father laughed, really laughed for the first time since I'd arrived. Later that night, back at the hotel, I tucked Aiden into bed and stood at the window, staring out at the city that once tried to break me. Elijah wrapped his arms around me. "You okay?" I nodded. I think I needed this more than I realized. The following month, we held the office grand opening in downtown Charleston. My father stood beside me as we cut the ribbon. My mother helped plan the event. Not with demands, but with gentle input, asking questions instead of giving orders. We weren't a perfect family. Maybe we never would be. But for the first time, we were a real one. I had come back not as the frightened girl they pushed away, but as the woman I had built from the ashes of their expectations. And this time I was writing the story. My story.